As the future brings us closer to more advanced technology that changes the way that we live, it can be easy to forget that once upon a time people didn't have it so good. When it comes to travel, mail delivery, and hauling freight, the United States experienced a boom thanks to the development of railroad technology that would eventually create the Transcontinental Railroad. Gaming Mind Studios takes you back to the past to experience this technological and economic boom with Railway Empire Complete Collection, a management sim that involves building and running your own railway networks across a burgeoning country. Railway Empire's story largely concerns itself with the construction of the overland route that was financed by Thomas C. Durand in 1862, after becoming vice president of the Union Pacific Railroad. It seems fitting then that Durant is one of your hosts in a campaign that breaks down the building of this project through a series of 5 chapters that cover the trials and tribulations of running an extended railroad network. Though really, Durant's job is to hobnob with politicians and the finance boys, leaving you, his chief engineer, to make it all work. Each chapter in the campaign is marked by a series of tasks that must be completed by a certain date, as noted by the game's ticking clock, which tracks the passage of time by month. In that time, you'll be expected to meet certain criteria, like delivering a number of cattle to a connecting city, delivering passengers, and increasing your company's financial worth. Tasks are divided into those that are deemed essential to the progress of the Transcontinental Railroad, while others are good tests of management skill and an opportunity for an influx of cash. The process of setting up rail lines is simple and starts with building train stations in several cities and then connecting them by setting down railroad tracks, being mindful about the topographical obstacles that can be conquered but at a great financial cost. Then you'll purchase train engines and set their routes to create a simple trade network. Rural farms that specialize in different trade goods like corn, cattle, cotton, etc. can be connected to these cities as well to ensure the delivery of essential goods. Depending on the level of simulation you choose to play with, you'll have to perform the extra task of building parallel tracks and signals to control traffic and prevent trains from running into each other. They won't actually do that, but instead they'll just not move until the route is clear, which could easily jeopardize your profits. The joys of setting up freight networks can be fun and soothing, but the comforts don't last long. Eventually, you'll start butting heads with competing railways for fortune and glory. This is the most ruthless part of the game, and as such, I found it a little off-putting. All I want to do is play with my trains, but when your competitors show up, they'll engage in business tactics that include hiring thugs to sabotage your train stations, luring prospective employees away from you, and even engage in a little bit of muckraking, all of which is in service to driving down your company's stock value. You can use these same tactics against these other companies along with the extra step of buying their stock. By doing so, you'll not only siphon profits from their successes, but eventually buy them out altogether through mergers that effectively run them off the playing field. Should you tire or complete the game's campaign mode, there's still a wealth of things to do. The PlayStation 4 release of Railway Empire Complete Collection comes with all previously released DLC, which means you can put the railway management skills learned and honed through the campaign to Mexico, the United Kingdom, Europe, and Australia. Like the base game, there's a lot of history tied up in these scenarios, as figures of prominence are your guides as you grow into the role of a railroad baron. These characters also offer up bits of contextual history lessons to give you a better idea about the eras you're working in. When you've completed those, you're welcome to try your hand at several challenges that are like remixed chunks of the main campaign. Challenges offer a hefty list of requirements that must be met by a specific date, and while you can play with competitive AI, there's also the option to run a game without them, which gives you one less thing to worry about. And finally, if you just want to fool around, to build a massive train network with an unlimited budget, no competition or time constraints, then the free mode is where you'll find fun without having to worry about all the particulars of managing your company. I loved free mode because it let me do things I wanted to in the main game, but couldn't because I didn't have the money or technology. Another more personal reason I liked it was because building whatever and wherever I want makes me feel like I'm making a model railroad, an activity I have fond memories of watching my dad do when I was a kid. There's a whole lot of things to look after when playing Railway Empire properly, and by that I mean you're forced to succeed in light of cutthroat competition and deadlines. Screens upon screens upon screens carry information about city development, supply and demand, company portfolios, hired staff, and owned trains. Originally designed for the PC, bringing the game over to the PlayStation 4 meant Gaming Mind Studios probably had to think creatively to map key menus and functions to the DualShock controller. It all works, for the most part, as a lot of important functions are tied to the most prominent buttons. However, I could never shake the thought that a mouse and keyboard setup would probably be much easier to use. There's a clunkiness to nearly everything, like trying to select a train while in motion, or trying to navigate through nested contextual button commands that I always found to be confusing. Manually selecting what train line should deliver, for example, is a process I could never lock down because I couldn't follow the logic of the button presses. I tend to struggle with management sims for the same reason I struggle with real-time strategy games. My preferred method of play is to take things slow, so I can better follow the action and determine the best and most profitable courses of action. That usually ends in utter failure because I get steamrolled by the enemy, or in the case of management games, fail to achieve my goals in time. Railway Empire is a tricky game that requires some brainpower, coordination, and planning, but it comes with an approach that I find easy to jive with. It helps too that the game can be tweaked in a few ways that cuts out some of the more advanced work, like having to place switches on tracks to control traffic and flow. The game's free mode alone is a wonderful addition because it's a great way to spend time understanding some of the deeper elements of the simulation without the game getting in the way. Plus, it's just fun to spend an infinite amount of money. I also like the game's historical approach, bringing pioneers of the railway back to life to impart a little wisdom and explain what it was like to be in the moment of such a massive undertaking in engineering. There were some aspects of the game that I did find to be a little cringy. Many of the personalities you encounter, be they competitors or staff to hire or even your avatar, have appearances that toe the line of stereotype. One of the railroad owners is presented like some 2-bit mafioso who says things like, "I'll have you sleep with the fishes," in a cartoonish Italian accent. In the Mexico expansion, the profile images for the bandits you can hire to disrupt and degrade a competitor's work look slightly exaggerated. And finally, there's a trophy called Campsite, which you earn by relocating Native American villages as you move to the West Coast. This feels more than a little insensitive, given the impact the railroad had on the ecosystem and living situations of this country's indigenous peoples. With its unique edutainment approach, Railway Empire is an engaging and informative simulation that introduces players to the colorful and capitalistic world of railroad management. Packed with lots of extra content that benefits from a healthy existence on PC, Railway Empire Complete Collection for the PlayStation 4 is a solid and thorough management sim that captures the essence of the golden age of American and international railroads. DarkStation gives Railway Empire Complete Collection for the PlayStation 4 4 stars.